Hello. Does it work? Can you hear me? Yes. Wonderful. Bonjour, good morning. Very excited to be here. This is normally an hour of content. I usually like to talk for 2 hours, but we don't have 2 hours. They're going to kick us out in 25 minutes. So very excited to be here. If there's one thing I like talking about, it's Pardot. So quick show of hands, how many people have Pardot? Have Pardot, have used it? Okay, so a few of us have it. Excellent. So if you haven't met me yet, hello, my name is Casey Cheshire. Very happy to be here. Just 3 quick numbers to share with you about me. The number 10, that's the number of years I've been working with Pardot, and I still love it, even after 10 years. It's fantastic. I'll talk all day about it. We'll drink wine and talk about Pardot at night. I'm happy to. 2,300, that's the number of Pardot implementations that myself and my team have done over the last 4.5 years. So we've been quite busy helping organizations set up Pardot in their accounts. Now, getting set up is one thing, but then actually using it and maximizing the tool is completely another thing. And so today, what we're going to talk about are 10 of the most important features you should be using or thinking about using in your Pardot account. And I'm gonna breeze right through and hit them all, and consider it like a checklist. So as we go through, ask yourself, am I doing this or not? And if not, make a note to potentially explore doing that in the future. Finally, the number 32. Any guesses what 32 stands for? Age? Oh, I have a bottle of wine for you afterward. Thank you. No, actually, it's the number of skydives that I've done. So I really like skydiving, and as much as Pardot and wine. So I'm happy to chat about skydiving and Pardot anytime after this presentation. A bit of a menu for you here. You don't have to necessarily write these down or know these, but we're going to go through them really quickly. These are the 10 different things, if I'm thinking about what we're going to talk about, and we're going to just go right through them all and try to get them all done in time. So first of all, is anyone new to Pardot or doesn't have Pardot or not really sure even what it does? Totally fine. That's another longer conversation, but I can summarize it in 4 words. When I first learned about Pardot, many people were saying all these different phrases, but one person was very clear, and he said, all you need to know is capture, nurture, automate. After 10 years, I've added my own word to that ending as well. Capture, nurture, automate, reporting. But when it comes to understanding what Pardot does, how does it fit in the ecosystem? It's simply capture, nurture, automate. The idea of capturing new leads with special forms that actually adapt and adjust and optimize themselves automatically. Nurturing, the idea of emailing people on a consistent basis, educating them, getting them warmed up to be ready to purchase. Automation, things like scoring and grading, as well as automatically assigning leads to a sales rep when the time is right. And then finally, reporting, ROI reporting, understanding what marketing is working and what isn't working, so you can adjust it and adapt. But really, these 4 words, you'll hear all the features. We're going to talk about 10 different things today, but it all comes down to how well it does those 4. The first one, if you could, for those that did raise their hand earlier that said they have a Pardot account, if there's one thing I would love you to check when you get back, or even if you're online right now, is have you set up the email authentication on Pardot? There's an interesting thing. 45% of all emails sent are spam, and that's a global metric. 45%, it's nearly half, which means when we're trying to get our messages through, we sometimes get our messages that look similar to spam, and then they get filtered and never get received by the people we're sending them to. So it's very important to set up your email authentication in Pardot, and what this is it basically is a DNS text entry that tells spam filters out there, email gateways, that Pardot's emailing on your behalf and it has your permission. Because you can actually have it come from any domain, but when the domains get checked, they're going to want to know, does it have permission? So right in here, you'll see, right in admin, there's a thing called domain management. And you'll want to check for these 3 happy green check marks on that screen. If you have those 3, you're good. If you don't have those 3, you'll see these nasty little red X's, and that means you haven't set these up yet. SPF, DKIM, these different things, they're just a simple line. It takes only a few minutes to add it to your web host. but what it does is it increases your deliverability. I've seen as much as 10% of an increase in deliverability just from doing this. It depends on who your recipients are and who you're mailing, but not doing it could potentially be leaving a lot of those deliveries on the table. And the crazy thing is you won't even know if the deliverability is affected, because a lot of times when there's a failure in this area, you don't get a warning letting you know that it's not set up properly. So do check this out. One thing you'll see when you get to that, if you do have a red X under SPF or any of these areas, you can actually click on it and it will tell you what should be there. And you can see it's a simple line of code to add to a DNS record. A little bit of a warning, modifying a DNS record, if you're not sure what that is or does, has the potential to blow up your website and have it not load for anyone else. So just a bit of caution, but if you are asking your web developer to do it, or if you're the web developer, great. But if you're requesting it of someone else to do it, just note that it's very simple instructions, but you just want to make sure you do it right. And all it really is a text entry, and Pardot actually tells you what it wants to see there. So as long as that's there, it works. And if you do have other email apps, if you're using Microsoft 360 or any of these other apps, even Google Mail, any of these other programs, they also have SPF entries. So this may start a journey of looking into, if you've ever had one of your sales reps say that, I've sent an email, but the person didn't get it or went to their spam box. Maybe we need to add Gmail to that same equation. And I'm happy to troubleshoot these things later with you. We can get really nerdy and talk about DNS text entries. Next, visitor activity tracking. Sometimes people find this scary. As a marketer, I find this amazingly awesome. But you can actually track all of the visitor information, all of the different activities that they've done. I have a quick screenshot for you here. I know it's kind of small, but you can see everything from, did they attend a webinar? Did they actually register for it? Did they view a video? If you use a tool called Wistia to host your videos, you can actually see how long they watched that video. And you'll see it on a little bar chart. They watched it for 23% of it. The other cool thing is you can have Pardot automatically take action if they've watched 75% or more of a video. Now, it doesn't really matter if it's a 2-minute video, but if they've watched almost 3/4 of an entire hour-long webinar on a particular topic or on your product, it might be good to know that. It might be good to notify the sales rep that they're actually doing some solid research, as well as sending them some additional information. So there's all sorts of integrations that can happen. Did they see the content? Did they read the content? What content do they like looking at? All this information is then passed over to Salesforce, which we'll talk about. But this is fantastic. 2 quick things to think about when it comes to cooking visitors and understanding if you can see this information. They're all anonymous visitors to start with, but Pardot is still tracking anonymous visitor activity. It doesn't know who they are until they take one of 2 actions. The first action is if they complete a Pardot form. Then it takes that anonymous activity and matches it up with the known activity. The second thing, which is also interesting, is if they click on an email sent by Pardot. That's all it takes. If you send out emails to a bunch of recipients, they click on a single link. It could be the unsubscribe link, but any link they click on, and they will be now cookied, and you'll know specifically that Casey Cheshire took these actions, not just an anonymous visitor. So one of the first emails we send out, especially when we first get Pardot, is an email that just says, I found a really helpful article on Forbes or on this journal of medicine or whatever is pertaining to their industry. I'll just send them a helpful link, like go check out this resource here. Doesn't require them filling out a form or anything, and then they're all cookied. And now I know all the things that they're doing, and I can interact with them that way. First touch ROI reporting. The most important question in marketing and with marketing technology is what's working and what's not working, right? So if you know what's working, you can adjust it, you can change it, you can modify it. One time we had a client who was doing 80 trade shows. Does anyone here do trade shows, events, conferences? Okay, several of us. If you do a lot of those, it can be helpful to know which ones are actually working, which ones aren't. And so this one client was doing 80 trade shows, and they had no idea which trade shows were effective and what weren't. And so the effect was they were still getting leads, they're still getting business, but they didn't know which ones were working. So they were effectively hostage to doing all 80. every year. And 80 trade shows, it's booths and travel, and that's a lot of work and a lot of investment. They're spending a lot of money. We set up ROI tracking so they could see just how much business they were getting from each individual event. Any guesses how many events were actually profitable or actually beneficial? What percent or what number? Out of 80 trade shows, how many events do we think were effective? You say 2? 5? Very cynical people. I love it. No, it's not that bad. It was about 30. About 30 events were beneficial. But that meant they were doing 50 events that were absolutely a waste of time and money and resources. And what they were able to do is keep doing those 30. They were actually able to spend more money on those 30, increase their level of sponsorship, stop spending on all those other events, and then they were able to use that money to go do more lead generation, more marketing activities. And they essentially they grew the company just from not spending all that money in a wasteful way. That's the power of ROI tracking. It's one of the most important things to set up. And you do that with Pardot campaigns. Pardot campaigns are like first touch campaigns. Where did I first find this person? Was it at a trade show? Was it at the Dreaming event? Or was it through an ad click? So ROI tracking is fantastic. Next, lead capture. Does anyone use Pardot forms currently? Pardot forms? Show of hands. So we have some use of Pardot forms. They're amazing. They're magical. They automatically adapt and adjust. So interesting to know, unless you change this, and you shouldn't, the Pardot forms will never ask the same question twice. So if you asked first name and last name on a form somewhere else, that information stays with them, the cookie stays with them, and now if they go to fill out a separate form, they will not be asked name and last name. It can be very annoying to answer the same question over and over and over. It's a wasteful amount of information. And guess what? The studies have shown that every field you can eliminate from your form can increase your conversions by anywhere from 1 to 4% per field. So if you have 12 fields on a form and you reduce that by 4, you can increase your conversion rate just by simplifying. And Pardot's trying to do that for you automatically. So one of the things to know about is progressive profiling. This sort of takes it to the next level. Knowing that Pardot is only going to ask the same question once, you can stage Pardot forms to continue asking different questions every time someone comes back and gets different content. So if they come the first time, sign up for a webinar, great. You can ask the first set of information. And I have this on the left here. So if they come, you can then ask them first name, email, their company. But when they come back to get a piece of content that you have, you can ask them a whole set of different questions. And by doing this, instead of asking all 12 questions at once and having a low conversion rate, you're spreading it out, and then you're going to get more people adding and converting on your forms. When groups we work with implement this, they immediately see an increase in their leads. We also saw one group that actually had a 200% increase in their leads generation just by updating their forms because the visitors were already on their website. They just didn't want to fill out the large forms anymore. Does anyone do nurturing right now? Have you used Engagement Studio or any of the nurturing emails with Pardot? Couple people, right? So here's one of the things. You can just simply email one-off emails in Pardot, but the real power comes from nurturing. It's called Engagement Studio. And what it allows you to do is schedule a series of emails. A lot of times, the marketer's job every month is to send out the marketing campaign. A lot of time and effort goes into sending that email. Well, instead of doing that every month over and over again, you take your best emails, you put them in a nurture program, and then those emails continue to go out without you needing to spend any more time or effort. And so one of the benefits of that is there's a bit of a danger zone when talking to a prospect and they say, yeah, I do want to buy that thing, but call me back in 6 months. We don't know if they're actually talking, if they're being sincere. Do they really want to purchase in 6 months, or they're just trying to be polite? Sometimes in the U.S., we get accused of being too polite. Oh, maybe I'll buy that in 6 months. Call me later, and we just never actually buy something. So the challenge can be a sales rep may put a reminder to call that person in 6 months. But what ends up happening is if that's the only thing they've done, they fall out of the top of mind. The prospect forgets about them. And there's no contract that says in 6 months or 4 months or next month, if they decide to actually make a purchase, they need to come back to you and continue the process. So setting up a nurture email allows you to stay top of mind with prospects. And what's really cool is this is an actual, I feel a bit like a paleontologist, like a science. This is a real nurture email that was sent out and received a response. And the person that was being emailed, her name was Kristen, and she had said, call me back in 6 months when I do a couple things. Those things were done actually in 3 months, and she began the research process again. And she received a nurture email and replied back to it and asked the sales rep for his schedule, which is really, really interesting because normally sales reps are always trying to get on your schedule. But here was a prospect asking for his schedule. It's fantastic. And just note that it's a very personalized email, and there's a whole nother topic and webinars on personal email versus corporate emails. Happy to answer questions on that later. Pardot inside of Salesforce. We always like to say marketers can hang out and play in Pardot. Sales can stay in Salesforce. We don't need sales to relearn or learn another tool. They're already having enough trouble logging activity in Salesforce, right? We don't need them to be learning Pardot now. So they don't need to be in Pardot to benefit from all the information. But what's fantastic is you can drop with iframes and other factors, you can actually drop all that engagement history into Salesforce on the contact and lead record. You can see a clip on here of the engagement history, seeing all the different things that happened, the fact that they visited the website, how much time they spent on different pages, did they complete landing pages, did they click on links, did they accept the webinar invite and attend it? There's all sorts of amazing things. The other thing that's not used very often is you can actually allow sales to add and remove people from lists. This is huge, and it's not all lists. We don't need sales getting in and messing up all of our marketing lists, but we can expose a few lists to them and allow them to add their own prospects to a nurturing campaign. Or if they're in the final stages of a sale, they can remove prospects from a list. It's fantastic, and they love doing it. We have also added lists like a snooze list, like a do not email. If they're in the final stages of an opportunity, they can put someone on a temporary do not email list so that the marketing campaigns won't go out and the opportunity can close. And so it really improves the sales and marketing alignment. Okay, grading and scoring. Is anyone using lead scoring? With Pardot, lead scoring, a couple hands. Anyone using grading? Right, so that's typically how we see it, just like 1 or 2 hands. The interesting thing is you're all actually technically using scoring right now because Pardot comes out of the box with scoring set up and just sort of happening behind the scenes. Every action they take gives a score. But sales reps hate scoring when it's all by itself because what ends up happening is you modify a score here, modify a score there. We've seen scores ranging from 100 or like 4 all the way up to 1,000. And then poor sales doesn't know what to do. And oftentimes the problem is you might have a partner that's trying to sell to you, or you might have a student at university doing research, and they're going to all the forums. You're filling all the forms out, getting all of your content, and then you're telling sales that this is a hot lead because they have a huge number, like John Smith in this example. Which one is the student? John Smith has a high score, but a low grade. When you use scoring and grading together, you have that two-dimensional picture. You can actually see how important it is. And to summarize scoring and grading, fantastic topic. Scoring is how interested they are in you. Grading is how interested you are in them. And it's really been powerful for me. Scoring is how interested they are in you. That's good to know. It's good to know how interested they are. But you also need the other number, which is how interested are you in talking to them? And that would be things like, are they the right role? Are they a good potential customer? All the different questions sales may be asking when they pre-qualify someone. So when you put those two together, you could see, actually, sales should be calling Rachel. Her score isn't as high, but she is an A. She is someone we want to talk to, and she's engaged. So you would want to call that one. As we get toward the end of the list, what you've seen is we had setup information, and then we've gotten more into lead capture pages, emails. Now we're getting more advanced. So the last couple things, the powerful features in Pardot, are like where things get really fun. So A/B testing and multivariate testing. Oftentimes when we talk to marketers or Pardot users, they've done subject line testing because Pardot makes it very easy to switch and change your subject. But there isn't necessarily a method to the madness. They're just trying different words in the subject lines. But the testing has had amazing results. And so what you see on here, there's just some takeaways. You could even try these takeaways on your own. The idea of swapping out generic images for actual real-life images. Saw an increase of 37%. Replacing a slider with a search bar, 550%. Another example, they cleaned up the copy. They simplified the copy and they changed the picture. And they did an A/B test on a landing page in Pardot, and they got a 400% increase. So these are just different things to inspire you and show you that you can actually do very easy A/B testing with emails as well as with landing pages in Pardot. It's fantastic. One quick shout out, I do a podcast called The Hardcore Marketing Show. You can see it on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher. And a lot of what I learned about A/B testing just in the marketing world, and then I applied that to Pardot, I learned from a guy named Brian Massey, and he calls himself the conversion scientist. And he actually wears a lab coat, and he drinks his coffee out of a beaker. So he's legitimately crazy, but he's constantly doing tests. And so I learned a lot from him. Show number 39 on the Hardcore Marketing Show. If you listen to that show, you'll hear that he actually has a hierarchy of testing. So if you're not sure what to test, there's actually an order to the chaos. Test this first, then this, then this. And that way you don't just test random things. You have a testing plan. And then here's a quick look at what it looks like to do the A/B testing and multivariate testing in Pardot. You can see it's very easy on the email side to have an A and a B version on the email. Try to test only one major thing at a time to keep it an A/B test. If you change too many things, you might get a winner, but then you might not know why that one won. So try to change either the subject line or the body, but not too many things at once because you might be unsure of what happened. Landing page testing in Pardot is very interesting. You can actually test more than just A and B. You can test A versus B versus C versus D. You can test multiple different pages all at the same time. They call it multivariate testing, but really it's A versus B versus C. It's like A/B testing times 4. Advanced dynamic content. This is really powerful. I love you all to get to the point where you're doing this. Advanced dynamic content changes up both HTML in your website as well as HTML in your emails. Not just a simple word like changing a first name or your industry, but a whole swath of HTML, which means the images can change and the text and the callouts. Everything can change on your website and your emails based on what you know about your prospect. And so oftentimes, one quick example, so we don't run out of time. One of our clients is in the healthcare space. And in the US, they were selling to both private and public hospitals. And for them, those are two different customers who act in different ways. And imagine how this could be for your own example. And so one of the things that they did is they had dramatic changes to their entire website. If they knew you were a private hospital, they showed you private hospital examples. All the case studies were private hospitals. The call to actions all involved private health. If they found out you were a public health practitioner, then you got all the, and even the images changed to show you examples of other public hospitals that were customers. On their website, the email templates automatically changed, and then even the call to action changed. They recently shared with us a success where a customer had actually, a large customer, the big win for the year, had actually purchased from them and shared that one of the reasons they chose them was because they focused on private health, right? Now, did they? Well, they had dynamic content set up to focus for that particular customer. But at the same time, you know some other customers probably buying in the public space because they saw what they related to. So fantastic win. Last thing, advanced analytics, and we're going to run out of time, but multi-touch reporting is now possible with Pardot in this thing called connected campaigns. It's the biggest thing since sliced bread with Pardot and Salesforce. All the campaigns are coming together now, so you don't just have first touch, but you have multiple touches you're able to report on. And B2B marketing analytics tied in with Einstein, fantastic. You can actually see which touches are leading to more conversions and more revenue. The last thing, just to talk about real quick, is that often what's missing in technology is a recommendation of what's the next best strategy. Oftentimes you'll say this feature, this feature, this feature, but there is an order to the chaos. So one thing we developed is a roadmap. It's a 10-step roadmap for how to maximize marketing automation. It's called the CSI. And I'm happy to share that with you afterward. It's one of the call to actions here is just send me an email and I can get you a copy of it. It's an assessment. You can ask yourself, kind of like what we did today, 10 questions around what's going on with your Pardot account, and it'll give you a score from 0 to 10 about how well you're using it. And it also tells you the very next recommended feature you should be using. So rather than trying to do all the features at once, and you can pick your battles and do one feature or another. The other shout out is if you'd like to learn more about Pardot on the technical side, there's a podcast called Pardot Life Hacks. Jennifer Lynn Snyder is amazing, and she actually does a deep dive. So if you're interested in connected campaigns, Pardot Life Hacks is the one to check out. Fantastic. And that's it. I actually managed to get it done in time. Any questions? Yes. The hierarchy of testing? Yeah, that's from Brian Massey. So what I'd recommend you do is listen to that podcast, number 39, from the Hardcore Marketing Show, because when I interviewed him, I got that out of him, because it's kind of it's like their trade secret, and he shared it with me. It starts with value testing, then layout testing, and then several other things. And he talks about how to test each and every one of them. Sure. Any other questions? And if not, you can always find me in the back or send me an email. I'm happy to. Again, with the CSI, definitely send me an email, and we'll get you that roadmap. Great. Thank you.